So, with this week on the blog and on the Hot Mess to Great Success podcast, I am talking about fear. Because last week I had a run in with someone who is very closely connected to my abuser. And I felt as if a portal to hell was opened and we had just let out the bats. That is how scared I was. I couldn't quite put my finger on exactly why, but I knew and I felt a fear, a presence inside of me that I have been dealing with for quite some time. And I'm sick of it, and I'm going to talk about it. So, I was the impact speaker at an event last Friday, a fundraiser benefiting my local domestic violence center, a woman's place here in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. And I would say about a half hour before I was about to speak, I noticed that my abuser's divorce attorney was in the room. This was a man who lied for my abuser. This was a man who egged my abuser on to keep going. This was a man who said to my abuser, "Oh, just file. She's probably pathetic and will come running back to you when she can't live without you." This was a man who decided to completely ignore our prenuptial agreement and instead start the process of suing me anyway. It was completely illegal, but the courts were crowded. My attorney still had to handle it, and it cost me a lot of money. This attorney was part of my abuser's game to tear me down, to bankrupt me, to ruin my life. And he was a central part of the circus that my abuser was allowed to create. So we easily hammered out an agreement for the divorce. And the next thing I knew, it was reneged, costing me thousands. That is what they want to do. Now, it's one thing to say, walk through fear. It's another to say, Jen, this will build strength. It's another to say, you can do this, you know it. And then to actually have to face the man who was such, again, a central part of such a time in my life where I was so brutally abused. I also went through a period of adjustment as I adjusted to him being in the room, where I realized he wasn't worthy of my time and attention at all. He didn't deserve to be in my space. He didn't deserve the right to hear me speak. He didn't deserve the right to be in my presence. And yet, here I was, and here he was. So I got a couple of pep talks from friends that I desperately needed. I also was lucky that the staff at a woman's place was on hand to help me manage the situation. You see, it's one thing to have an advocate walking next to you as you walk into court filing for a restraining order. You know you're going to have to see your abuser then. It's quite another to give of your time and be faced with such a vicious individual in the room. So the staff of a woman's place jumped into their advocacy role and did exactly what they were supposed to do for me. What do you need? What do you want to do? Here are some suggestions. That's what advocacy for domestic violence victims and survivors is. As I look back and reflected and picked up on the fact that he wasn't worthy of being present in my space, I also reflected back on the fact that he stayed in the room. That's vicious. That's diabolical. That's the stuff of monsters. It's vile. If he had any integrity, if he had a moral compass, if he had a center and a presence to himself and he was aware, he would have known that the proper thing for him to do was to communicate clearly with me that he was not going to be there to hear me speak, sorry. It wasn't appropriate, but yet he stayed. He stayed, and then for the rest of the event, gave me the death stare. Now, in reflection, I feel bad for this individual. He's sort of pathetic. I mean, he's an abuser in his own right. But also, I feel bad that he has so little in his life that the only way that he has fun is to abuse me. And I could see him texting. I'm sure it's highly unethical for him to let my abuser know what I was up to or record it in any way. But he made sure that I knew, especially through the death stare, the rest of the event, that he was watching. It was super creepy. Now, I had a choice to make also. I had a bunch of choices to make, but I had a choice to make of, do I call him out? And I decided not to, because I didn't think it was fair to turn the event into a circus. But at the same time, I now struggle with the idea, well, what do we do with this? Do we let abusive individuals into rooms where they get to pretend that they care about domestic violence victims and survivors? I mean, on one side, he could say, look, I make a lot of money off of abusing these people, off of abusing the victims and survivors. I'm here because you help clean up the mess I make. It's how I make my money, and someone's got to clean it up. Whatever his purpose was, I mean, the hypocrisy of him being in the room was one thing. Whatever his purpose was, again, it was pathetic. I stood up. I still did my speech. I shared everything that my domestic violence center did for me, the gifts that it gave to me, and I shared the journey that every victim and survivor has to take to get to the other side. And I did share the fear that A Woman's Place helped me get through and helps me manage. The tools that they give me help me manage that on a daily basis, and I am grateful. That's the fear that our domestic violence survivors and victims live with. And that's the fear that we need to walk through every day. If you're supporting a survivor or a victim, understand the evil presence that is in their life, not just their abuser, but the clowns that the abuser puts around them, like attorneys who are unscrupulous, and give her all of the support that you possibly can. Thanks for listening.